Hello and welcome back to my 3-part mini-series on Animal Crossing. This is part 2 and today we are going to be covering how Animal Crossing motivates the player. I did mention motivation in my last entry to the series, but I do plan on retreading those waters so you don't need to sit through the 40-minute runtime of that video just to hear about motivation at the end of it. Also, as you can see, this video is much shorter than the last video. Based on the analytics, I think that people would be more engaged if I kept the video brief and to the point, so here we are. Anyway, without further ado, let's get to it. Now, I think that we can all agree that Animal Crossing is a great case study when you're diving into the question, how do I motivate the player? Animal Crossing seemingly refuses to succumb to the typical gameplay tropes to keep the player playing. I mean, just pay attention to what Isabelle says when you log on some days. She says things like, there's nothing new today, nothing happening, or to the effect of, when you log on, nothing will be different, your experience will be the same. The developers of this game did this purposefully, which is weird to think about because most developers would never dream of doing such a thing. Now, like I covered in the previous video, I believe that the genre that encompasses Animal Crossing is a work simulator. Therefore, I think that it would be a great idea to look into how people in the real world are motivated to work, so we can draw correlations between that and how Animal Crossing is structured as a game. So, if you have watched the previous video, you will already know that it is better for both work motivation and player motivation for the motivator to accomplish things in either the workplace or the game space to be pleasure seeking rather than pain avoidance. This is especially true for video games because there is no monetary transaction involved going in the way of the player, which means that at least there isn't the intrinsic, impossible to avoid pain avoidance motivator of, if you stop working, you won't get paid. Now, as a side tangent, this could be one of the reasons why people are more motivated to work as freelance, because unlike traditional workplaces, freelance does not have a requirement to turn up and to do a certain amount of hours in a shift. So the monetary transaction then turns from a pain avoidance motivator to a pleasure seeking. People who do freelance are actively seeking out the reward of monetary gain, rather than when you work, oftentimes you are just trying to avoid the pain of losing that monetary gain. Now, I mentioned this because with video games that involve pain avoidance motivators like daily login bonuses like free-to-play mobile games or maybe online rank decay like Overwatch, online rank decay is when you stop playing an online game and then your rank slowly decreases over time. So once this player becomes free of those burdens, either by forgetting one day or just by actively deciding to stop playing your game, it isn't like a small break between the player and the game. It's nothing small, it's more like a divorce. I also mention this because Animal Crossing, if oversimplified, has a very similar structure to that of free-to-play games with the use of their time as a barrier. Now, the game also has a daily login system, but I believe that this is done well enough to be a non-issue. This is because, relating back to the time aspects of the game, the daily login bonuses do not affect the main way of progressing through the game, which is doing everything you can in a day window to earn as many bells as possible. If, for example, the daily login bonuses that you receive for going to the machine in the town hall give you bells instead of Nook Miles, then I will consider that an issue, especially if it was a substantial amount and an exponentially increasing amount. But alas, it does not. Referring back to my No Man's Sky video that I made a while ago, last year, I think that there are a lot of similarities between the questions why play Animal Crossing and why play No Man's Sky. Ever since the DLC for No Man's Sky called No Man's Sky Beyond came out, I realized that the sandbox games similar to both No Man's Sky and Animal Crossing, having a wide net of tasks to do is great for answering those questions. Now, if you allow me to talk personally for a moment, my main motivator for Animal Crossing was to expand my house to the limit, which means 6 rooms, the main room, 3 extensions branching off the main ground level, an upstairs and a downstairs. And on top of that, I wanted to make sure that I had no debt left with Mr. Tom Nook. Now, on the other hand, my girlfriend, who shares the same island as me, now that's why it looks so amazing, by the way, that's not my doing at all, her main motivation at the moment is to try and grow every type of flower possible in the game. Now, this is no easy task, because not only do you need a lot of the base flowers to begin with before you can start crossbreeding them, but the crossbreeding process itself is complicated and can take a long time. I mention both mine and my girlfriend's motivators for playing the game because they both make use of two different core mechanics to motivate the player that Animal Crossing has to offer, whilst at the same time both maintaining a vital similarity that I will get onto in a moment. If we talk about my motivation to have a debt-free life and a big old house for a moment, like I mentioned in the previous video in this miniseries, it requires bells, and only bells as well. There are no resources directly involved in upgrading the house. However, you can't just get bells. You get bells by actively engaging in other parts of the game. So because of that, I as the player was more motivated to fish, chop trees, pick up fruits, go to other islands, and even gamble on the turnip exchange market just to get bells to pay off debt. There are so many things you can do, and like I mentioned with regards to No Man's Sky, having such a wide net can be a great way for players to be motivated and engaged in your game, and also to keep them logging back in every day. Imagine if, like in the original release of No Man's Sky, the only way to get bells was by mining. That was it. What if you didn't want to mine that day? What if you wanted to do something else? Now, the original No Man's Sky was even worse because not only was the only way to get money was to mine, but the only way you could spend money was by upgrading the tools you needed to mine. Thankfully, however, Animal Crossing does a great job of giving the player the option to do mining one day, chopping trees on another, and maybe venturing to another island to see if you can dig up some fossils to sell if, of course, Blathers turns you down first. Now, let's move on to my girlfriend's motivation to play the game. Like I said, at the moment, it is breeding flowers. Now, previously, it had been a combination of decorating the island and her home, but at the moment, it's just flowers. Flowers are unique in terms of motivation and the structure of the gameplay because they are purely time-based. Assuming you have them all in the correct orientation and formation, that is. What you need to do is, assuming it isn't raining, log on every day and water the flowers on the island so they have the best opportunity to grow and breed new flowers that you can only get by breeding. Unless you cheat, there is no other way to fast forward the game. You can't pay Tom Nook to use his god powers to skip a day, and you can't pay Zynga for special fertilizer to get them growing faster. I once attempted to do this back in the day, but thankfully my mum's card bounced. This is important because with both this motivator and my motivator, there is a gate to progression via the time mechanic in the game that can be found in games like Farmville and Gachas, but unlike those games, there isn't a pain avoidance motivator. If I don't pay my debt on my house for a month, the debt isn't going to incur any interest, and if my girlfriend decides not to log on for a couple of days, her flowers aren't going to have wilted and vanished from the island, resulting in her losing days of work. If that was the case, I can assure you that Animal Crossing would not have such an avid fan base, and definitely would not have such a loyal and recurring fan base that it has today. Now, thank you guys for watching this much shorter video on Animal Crossing. If you have made it to the end, then please let me know in the comment section below whether you think this lighter style of content was more engaging, or whether you would maybe prefer me to balance the more in-depth analysis with the runtime and watchability of the video a little better. Also, the like goal for this video this week is 15 likes, and if we hit it, then we will be doing a live stream showing off the island in all its glory. And if you want to join me on my island or show off your own island, then I will be more than willing to do so. One last thing, the final installment for this mini-series will be a collaboration between myself and Red Angel, a fellow video essayist. So if you are a fan of hers, then get excited. It will be coming out in a week or two, depending on whether we can get the video done before next Sunday or not. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.